All right. Well, good morning again, everyone, and welcome to Thursday morning Bible study as we continue our study of the Ten Commandments. So we've already done the first three. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no strange gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee graven images, or thou shalt not take the Lord thy God name in vain. And remember thou to keep holy the Sabbath day. So we've done a lot already. So today we will start with the fourth commandment. All right. Um, so the way the Catechism divides it up, it kind of works with Jesus's commandments. The two great commandments is to love God and to love your neighbor. So the first three commandments uh, applied to loving God, and then the final seven commandments apply to loving neighbor. So that's how the um, Catechism breaks it up into those two sections. So, who wants to read the fourth commandment? It's right up there.
Come on, you all.
I'll read it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. He was obedient to them. The Lord Jesus himself recalled the force of this commandment of God. The apostle teaches, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth.
Okay. So, the actual commandment is honor your father and your mother. It's that simple. But it does add, and it's the um, commandment that comes with a promise that if you honor your mother and your father, then your days will be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. He was obedient to them is a reference to when Jesus was growing up. Okay, and then the final passage comes um, from comes from Jesus's and Paul's kind of references to the commandment.
So, just a question that see there it is. So, if the commandment just says to honor your mother and father, that's it, right?
That's the commandment, but then it couples it with a promise. So if you honor your father and your mother, then your days will be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you.
Well, who puts that there? Who puts that there?
What God did when He gave it to Moses.
So okay, that's where you confused me. You said the commandment was honor your mother and father,
Well,
but then
that's a commandment, right? Because that's what you're being commanded to do.
right, but
And then
then
the second part is just a promise that's affiliated with the commandment.
so God put both of them together. That's the whole commandment, really.
It's in the Decalogue. If you read it, it's there. Okay, so it's not somebody else's commentary.
Right. That's what I
God
want.
promises that if you honor your father and your mother, your days will be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you.
Right. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay, so what the Catechism says is it's interesting that the that kind of our love of neighbor proceeds in sort of a certain order and priority. So that the first and highest commandment within the command to love your neighbor is to honor your mother and your father. Okay. And then as you move on to thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, those are going to be secondary commandments of loving your neighbor. Okay, so the highest command of loving your neighbor is to honor your mother and your father. So far, so
Can
good.
I can I make
Mhm.
a comment? and this is a very modern day look at this. The thing that's standing out to me as I'm looking at this, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And with that, because we have situations where people do what I'm going to call crazy acts, and you have parents who teach their children crazy things, and then the kids feel like I'm supposed to do this because they're my parents and I'm supposed to honor my parents. But that clause right there, what to me is what would save the child from thinking the child is doing something wrong by disobeying the parent, because when the parent is teaching them something that's not in the Lord's eyes, it is no longer right. It
Right,
becomes wrong.
absolutely. And that the catechism will play that out later on about, yeah, how strict is the commandment. And the commandment is premised on the idea that your mother and father are living according to the love and law of God.
Yeah.
So if they are not, then right, the obligation is, it's different. I mean, it doesn't mean you can go and smack your parents upside the head, but it does mean that you are not obligated to follow them if they're not doing the Lord's work.
Oh, Gwen, that was a very good observation, I thought. Very good observation, because that sometimes that statement holds you bound. I've seen that it holds people bound, because no matter what the parents do to you, you're supposed to honor them, no matter what they do to you.
Yes, and
Right, and it sometimes traps children.
That interpretation, just like the interpretation to wives obey your husbands, has been, because of their misinterpretation, has perpetuated the abuse of children and the abuse of women.
Yes.
Yes.
And certainly the commandments don't condone abusive behavior. So,
Right.
But there were times when, if children were saying, my father or my mother are abusing me, they would have been told, well, that's your burden to bear. That's because
Right.
you got to obey them and you got to honor them no matter what.
No matter what they do. Yeah.
So, and that'll be played out later in this section. Now, the interesting thing that I found about this section, because I hadn't actually read it through before in terms of how the Catechism deals with this commandment, it uses this commandment as a way of expanding our obligations of honoring authority beyond our mother and our father. So you can see in the highlighted section, somebody want to read that in paragraph 2199, the highlighted section?
It likewise concerns the ties of kinship between members of the extended family. It requires honor, affection, and gratitude toward elders and ancestors. Finally, it extends to the duties of pupils to teachers, employees to employers, subordinates to leaders, citizens to their country, and to those who administer or govern it. This commandment includes and presupposes the duties of parents, instructors, teachers, leaders, magistrates, those who govern, all who exercise authority over others or over a community of persons.
Okay, so how do you all interpret what it just says there?
I love it.
So it's telling those on the other side that they have a responsibility also.
Right. Yeah, to me, it's reading that those in leadership anywhere, leadership in any leadership role has the authority to be responsible to others who's under them.
So and I think that in addition to them being in a leadership role, that role has to be for the good of us.
Right. Right.
If it happens that you don't have a mother and father, I really like that. Whoever's in charge of you at that time, the extended family. It
Yeah.
just tells you whoever's in charge of you at any given time or place should be given that respect and honor.
Right. As
Well, yeah,
long
it
as it's
does
for
say
the
that.
good.
I
I
like.
think as long as it's for the good of us, then yes. Which to me, the good of us, for the good of us, means that they have a sense of morality as well.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a two-way
Yeah.
situation. Mhm.
You said it
They
right.
have a responsibility also.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what the Catechism does is it uses this commandment, honor thy mother and thy father, as really a commandment that talks about relationship towards anyone in authority over us. That anybody with legitimate authority over us, we owe a duty to honor and respect their authority over us.
Mhm.
Um, but they also owe a duty to us
Right.
to exercise that authority, in an appropriate manner.
Right.
Now, offhand, what do you think about? Do you think that's really what do you think the commandment honor thy mother and father really applies to all that other stuff?
It sounds good. It seems
Well,
like
I don't know whether I like it. Yeah, number one, like Regina said, it sounds good and I like it. But I don't know when they came out of Egypt that was the sole intention of God. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that when he wrote honor their mother and father, it went beyond that. I just thought it was just in that text. I like the text that 2199 puts it in, but I'm not sure that's what God intended it to do when they came out of Egypt.
And you
I
know
think
what?
it's
Yeah, go
well,
ahead.
I'm just
Go ahead,
using the
Gwen.
word, an extrapolation of it, because I think that I agree with Dee. I think that the basis is the familial thing. But
And
I think that when you extrapolate on on how far it can go,
and
I
you know
think
what?
that's how we did that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Gwen and
Mhm.
Dee, I agree with both of you. That's why I've been kind of quiet because even reading this, it was like I'm struggling with it, and I think I'm having a hard time. And you use my word exactly. In fact, I said, well, maybe I'm not defining it correctly when I thought about the word extrapolate. It just seems to go, and I keep thinking, I said, maybe the fathers of the church, when they looked at this commandment, they just decided to extrapolate all of this from honor thy mother and father. And I'm thinking, well, how did they get there? And I think that's my struggle because it seems that there's too much extrapolated from this commandment, and then I think about how the world actually is and how they define family. And there were so many things that were troubling to me because it sort of puts restrictions on how you should be thinking about what constitutes a family. And it presupposes a lot, and they use that word presuppose. So I think I'm struggling with how they got all of these. I don't know how to refer to it, how they got to all these different ways of explaining this particular commandment to extending to authorities and things like that. It just seems a
Well,
lot.
I think you said it. You said it in your talk. I think you. I think they had a discussion like we did, and because of the way the world is and the different makeup of the families, I think
Yes,
they had this kind of discussion that we're having.
yes.
How do you put this families into this context?
right, right, right.
I'd like to go back to 2197. I think you had that highlighted earlier, Father, but where it picks up, well, let me start at the beginning. It said the fourth commandment opens the second table of the Decalogue. It shows us the order of charity. God has willed that after him, we should honor our parents to whom we owe life and who have handed on to us the knowledge of God.
Mm-hmm.
We are obliged to honor and respect all those whom God, for our good, has vested with this authority.
Now, I believe that part of it is what God meant with that particular commandment. The other part, while it's very good, I believe they added it on. Instead of just your parents, anyone who is kind of sort of in charge of you, you should respect. But I don't believe God meant that or added that much into
In the original context.
it. Exactly.
I would agree. I think this is the work of theologians.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Because certainly when the Ten Commandments were delivered, um, God understood there were leaders. There was Moses, there was Joshua, there was Aaron. Well, Joshua hadn't really raised up yet, but there was Aaron. And so he could have easily said, and you shall obey those in authority over you. But he didn't. So I think what this is really the work of is whoever organized this catechism, they wanted to try to be clever, right? And try to associate as many commandments as possible or more moral virtues as possible with one of the Ten Commandments. And so they take this and they extrapolate, as the word you've been using, onto all of these other people that have authority and say it stems from this commandment. I mean, I don't have any problem that we are to respect those who have authority over us, as well as we add on those with authority over us have certain obligations and duties to us. I don't have any problem with that, but I just don't really think that follows from this commandment. I think this commandment is about family, and it does raise the primacy of the family unit in society. But I'm not sure then it extends to teachers and employers and government officials.
And politicians.
Yeah, I mean, again, you'll find those things in other sections of the scripture. So I'm not challenging the validity of those things, but I just think it's a stretch to say that God intended all of that when he gave this fourth commandment.
Right.
So,
Okay.
And they are supporting it. Scroll back down, Father Rich, to the last line in 2198. That extrapolation is, wait a minute. It constitutes one of the foundations of the social doctrine of the church. And I think that's why the theologians put all that in there.
yeah, I would say, though, if you look at the rest of the commandments against, so the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. The seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. The eighth, thou shalt not bear false witness. The ninth, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not cover your neighbor's goods. Those are all socially related. They're all about the protecting the foundation of society and the building blocks. So to say that it all stems from the fourth commandment, in my opinion, ignores the fact that the next six commandments all are trying to do similar things.
Right.
So they're trying to form a cohesive society by making rules and commandments of how we are to live within our society. So that's all. I just think somebody, some clever theologian said, oh, I know, we could probably tie it all to the fourth commandment. And isn't that really kind of cool that we can say the fourth commandment also, requires all these other things? And, yeah, it's clever, but I'm not really sure that's what the commandment covers.
Okay, well, that makes me feel much better, Father Rich, because I thought maybe I had quote unquote wrong thinking, because I couldn't figure out how they got all of this out of that commandment. It was
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
bit,
Again, I just think it's the work of clever
yeah,
theologians. And again, I'm not challenging what they'll say, but I just don't necessarily. I mean, in other words, I don't think you have to trace every moral rule and virtue to the Ten Commandments. You know,
right, right. And you know what else? Because what bothered me to some extent was if a child, well, I think someone was talking earlier about how sometimes parents are teaching their children wrongly. And then I think about the whole, abuse within the Catholic Church. They said, well, if the child thinks it's morally wrong, then they don't have to obey. But then how does that child know that what it is morally wrong if they've been taught opposite of what they should be believing? And same thing with other instances in life. If you've never been taught what is morally right, if you don't have that moral compass, then how do you know you're supposed to like sort of rebel against what's being done to you if it's morally wrong? So it just, it took a stretch there.
all right. Well, let's just keep kind of pressing a little bit. Um, let's just now see. Now they're going to take this commandment about mother and father, and the first thing they're going to do is talk about that in terms of a nuclear family unit. Okay, and I'm using modern words for all of those things. Um, but let's just look at the highlighted sections, and then we'll come back to this. So, who wants to? I don't know if Gwen, if you want to continue, or if somebody else wants to read the highlighted portions.
I'll take it. Marriage and the family are ordered to the good of the spouses and to procreation and education of children.
So the first thing they do is link the family to mother and father in the context of marriage. Okay. And it creates this understanding of marriage that we'll talk about in a bit, but that marriage has two purposes. Would you see what the two purposes of marriage are?
Have children and
Amen.
Procreate.
And educate.
Educate them.
Right,
Okay,
make
well,
and educate
the,
babies.
the two are the good of the spouses, that's the first,
Yep.
and then the procreation and education of children is the second. Okay, so the procreation and education are not two separate purposes. They're combined, So keep that in mind that the church teaches that the fundamental purpose of marriage is to, support the welfare of spouses, that a husband and wife support each other for their own good, right? And also it's ordered towards the procreation and education of children. Okay. Um, and that's where a lot of the rules are going to start coming up about birth control and all of those kinds of things, because the church is going to say, well, is it for the good of the spouses and for the procreation and education of children? And then it starts to get complicated. We'll keep let's kind of keep doing a little bit, and then we'll come back to some of that stuff. All right.
Back to some of that stuff when you be gone.
What's that?
We'll come back to that stuff when you be gone.
No, yeah, no. We'll. I just want to kind of tease out some of this stuff that you all have already kind of, innately have felt about what you're hearing. So let's continue. What is it called? The Christian family
Yep.
Yeah.
is
The domestic church.
domestic church. So now they're going to begin to introduce ideas of church even into this commandment.
Yeah, easy.
And the first church is the domestic church, the church
With the family.
of what happens in the family.
Inside the home.
Okay. And then it's going to build on that and extend to the family as a fundamental building block of
Society.
society. Okay. Family life is an initiation into life in the society. So, how one experiences the family will teach how one is to live within a society. So, see how they're kind of massaging all of this,
Yeah, but that
you know,
doesn't work. I mean, Lord.
building on it. So you go from mother and father to, or to husband and wife, to family life, to domestic church, to life in the society. Okay. And then here they start introducing some other very interesting ideas. So who wants to read 2209?
Oh, wow.
Where
Where families cannot fulfill their responsibilities, other social bodies have the duty of helping them and of supporting the institution of the family.
what do y'all think of that?
Once again, it's a
Well,
nice thing, but it's not practiced.
Mhm.
Well,
Right, because I'm a social order person, and when it says that it is the duty of the society to help to support the institution of the family, the thing of it is, for me, define the family, because the definition of a family
Yep.
has changed over these centuries, these decades, these centuries. The definition of a family has changed, but it does preface it with where the families cannot fulfill their responsibilities.
And the other thing, Gwen, we're having the problem with the abortion issue in the children, having the children, and then and other social bodies have duty of helping them. So I had this child that I didn't want, but the other social bodies are supposed to help them. You know, with the other stuff that they need, child care, and all the other things that the mother need is not doing that. That's what this, to me, this thing is saying. Other social bodies have the duty of helping them and supporting teaching of the family. That is not happening.
And according to this, it's immoral for it not to happen.
Right. We want one thing, and we're supposed to be doing the other thing, but we're not. We want one thing, and we don't do the other thing.
And so that's where but that's where the politics comes into this again. That is not really talking about.
Right. You want me to do this thing, but you don't want to help me get through this, and I don't have the funds or the ability or the mental capacity to make this happen, and you're not helping me to do this. You're just telling me to do this one thing, and then everything will be hunky-dory. It is not. And
what catchphrase that we hear a lot, and that's very prominent within the African American community, what catchphrase captures this thought here?
Oh, I can't even think.
It takes a village to raise a child.
It takes a village.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
It takes a village. That's what this is basically saying, is that families are not to be seen on their own. That they need to be supported by other social bodies. Not, I mean, and that you could say, what do you mean by social body? But these social bodies have the duty of helping them and supporting them. And what happened? Do you all remember what happened politically when Hillary Clinton published her book, It Takes a Village?
I don't remember what happened.
The Republicans lambasted her and said, "This is horrible social principles. You're interfering with the obligations of the family. You're turning us into a socialist society by saying this. That you're saying that the government needs to raise the children. No, it should be the family." And I'm not sure that's at all what she was saying, that the government needs to raise the children. I think what she was trying to say is the society needs to support the family in raising the children,
and
and
Right.
in a
Father,
world where that becomes difficult, the society needs to step in and help.
I don't know what happened to us.
And
When we was in this small communities, these small tribes, everybody child belonged to everybody, and everybody helped that child take. Everybody took care of that child as far as feeding it, teaching it, whatever that child need to grow. The whole community helped their child. The child, one mother gave birth, but that child belonged to the whole community. I don't know what happened, what broke that up, and it's not happening now. You have a child, and the child just pushed out into the community, and that's the way it's supposed to be. It is horrible, and it's horrible the way they we are a socialist body. Why? Because people don't want to do that.
I think people are so afraid of that term, because that's why I have no problem calling myself like a socialist Democrat,
Right.
because I definitely believe in the whole village concept, and because that's how I was raised.
Right.
Because I was born in 55, 50s, 60s. Maybe it started dying in the 70s. We even those, and I was raised in such a bad neighborhood, but even the quote unquote hoodlums in the neighborhood were looking out for the kids.
Out for the kids.
Right. Right.
They did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nowadays, nobody
Now
wants
they're
to be
recruiting them.
They don't want to
It-
be.
yeah. But
They're afraid they're gonna-
oh, go ahead.
They're afraid they're going to get some feedback that they don't want. They don't even say hardly good morning to you because they're afraid for some kind of negative feedback. Parents today aren't like they were back in the day. They don't want you telling your child what to do.
I think it just goes back to how the times have changed. You used to have neighbors, everybody knew each other, everybody was looking out for each other. But in the society that we live in now, there's just been what we call a breakdown of the, I guess, nucleus family. There's so much terror, I think, among how people feel. They're not sure. Just look at the news. You see how, elderly people are being attacked by the young folks, and people, I think, are running scared. But the politics of these times don't help either, because it's like you have to be either socialist or you have to be for big business. There's just doesn't seem to be a meeting. And I'm with you, Gwen. I guess I would consider myself a socialist Democrat, because it takes more than just one group or one phase to help people progress and to do better and to be uplifted. And everybody doesn't see that.
I think that's why it was such a beautiful message that Tim Walz sent to the public, to so many people, when he quoted Matthew in that debate the other night. And he's basically, whatever you do for the least among you, you do it for me.
Right.
And I think that was just so powerful in that moment for him to say that so many people could hear it. I hope a lot of people heed to it, but at that point in time when I was listening to that debate, that was a beautiful thing he said.
Can we say that people have given up their godly principles to conform to the trends of the world that may have caused a deterioration of this breakdown, why we seem to become an immoral society?
It's like we have no moral compass anymore. There's no moral compass.
It sets with us, the people, though, right?
Right, because people are setting the immoral compass as normal.
Right.
It's not just a moral compass and all. I think that, to me, I look around and it's like people seemed to have lost hope. You know, I was known in my community when raising my children. I was known as a bonus mom, and that was because I welcomed all the children. And to this day, they call themselves my bonus children. And I mean, they are adults with children themselves. But, you know, I keep saying that it feels like people are just losing hope. And that's one thing I pray to never lose is my hope. Things
Right.
are kind of bad, kind of rough. They're without organization and order, but I still hope.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
always say, where did the wheels fall off the wagon, right?
Yeah.
Where was the chain
Yeah.
broken? So we need to identify that why.
And I just wanted to interrupt for a minute. If we can go over 22:11 before Father leave. It's talking about all the stuff that we're talking about. You know, Father Rich, can you roll that up a little bit? You know, you didn't highlight that. The freedom to establish a family, have children, bring them up in keeping with the family's own moral and religious conviction, the protection of the stability of married bond, and the institution of the family, the freedom to profess one's faith, to hand it on, and raise one's children with the necessary means of and institutions, the right to private property, to free enterprise, to obtain work and housing, and the right to immigrate. Oh, Lord. In keeping with the country's institution, the right to medical care, assistance for the aged, and family benefits, the protection of security and health, especially the respect to dangers like drugs, pornography, alcoholism, etc. The freedom to form associations with other families so to have representation before civil authority.
All right. So that actually kind of reads like a party platform, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So is it Republican or is it Democrat?
Democrat.
Right.
I think it's neither. I think it's both.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. I mean, you could read some of this and you could say, yeah, the Democrats would say that. And then you could read other things and say, yeah, the Republicans would say that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that tell you?
But what this says though is that they have all those freedoms along with the community assistance. And that's the key, you know, that because I do agree that both parties make these make at least some of these statements that both parties do. But what they're not realizing is that the government and society are supposed to work together.
Yeah.
And we don't
Well,
see that
and
in
I don't think Republicans or Democrats would deny that. Their differences in how the government is supposed to support, you know, or facilitate it. Now, I would say probably overall, if you kind of counted them up, this is more Democrat than it is Republican. Um, but it's both. You know, so it's really I think in our country, both Republicans and Democrats are off base when they try to say we're the ones who are the most moral.
Yeah, because you know, Vance did number one, the freedom to accept a family, have children, and bring them up in keeping the family own moral and religious conviction. He talked about family and having children, and that's why we got this cat lady thing going on. Because if you didn't have the family and children, you're an old lady with a cat, and that's been in the news forever. But he did have that statement.
right, because he was ignoring the first, because there were the two purposes of the family, and he was only looking at the second purpose.
Right.
He's seeing the purpose of the family only as having babies and educating babies, but the first part said for the good of the couple.
Right.
The good of the couple may not be having children. If the couple, an example, if the couple knows that they have some kind of a genetic thing going on that would guarantee that they would have children who are very much impaired. Why would we not support the couple in choosing not to have children. You know, that's just throwing something out there, food for thought.
Yeah,
But you have a political a person representing a political party who's saying no matter what, they have to have children. And
Right.
if they don't, then you know that started the whole
well,
childless cat lady thing.
well,
So
That's the
and
whole
saying
thing,
that
to
a woman
have the
has no
freedom
purpose
to do
unless
that.
she has children.
well, this thing doesn't mention a single person, period. It mentioned, we're talking about, and this is, remember when we started. We started under honor their mother and father. They got all this stuff under honor their mother and father. And now they're down here with them in the political community and talking about the marriage bond. There's nothing in this thing that talks about anybody having kids or not having kids single. They're talking about two people that the God put in here to procreate. We talked about that earlier, and to have and raise your children. And you know, right now we got to that part where you can go ahead and have. I don't know how Father talk to people, but it's not here yet. Not yet.
And that's how the wheel came off the wagon.
Right.
Right.
Did y'all hear just your conversation just now? We went from honor the mother and father
Yeah.
to now, and then we got our opinions, Democrat, Republican,
Yeah.
and then which way you decide to go is how the wheel come off the wagon.
You know,
So,
the mother.
But it is still the definition of the family. We have to be able to define family, honor the family, the
honor
freedom
the,
to establish family, and then there's a comma.
See, there.
So you have a family and then you have children. So you already have a family established with just the man and wife.
But
Right, but
But
that's
wait a
the
minute, but you have to
freedom.
see
That's
right
that's the
now what's,
freedom.
I mean, the
wait,
church is very clear as to who it considers family. So does it consider two men raising an adopted child family?
it
And
doesn't
it
say.
does not,
The
Well,
church doesn't.
even though we have that.
it certainly doesn't define family that way, right?
No.
No, and that's what I say. We
So,
have to define family.
well, and well, the church does define family. You may not like the way the church defines family, but it does say a family is a man and a
man and
woman
woman.
in a marriage raising children.
Mhm.
That's family. Okay, now you may disagree with that, but that's what the church teaches, and that's why this is, when you look at this platform, so to speak, it's not fully Republican and it's not fully Democrat, and
Mhm.
it highlights to me that once you then take these moral principles and you begin to move into the political realm, uh, no really one politician or no one political party captures all of this.
No, you're
So
right.
it then raises the questions, how do we navigate the political world knowing that no one politician stands for all of this? And that's one of the things that begins to raise, what are the priorities? What are the most important things?
Yeah, I'm
And
really just under.
that's where a lot of the debates occur. So, right now, it seems like the Catholic Church says the most important thing is abortion. The second most important thing is husband and wife, in marriage, you know, and so you have to kind of first go towards the politicians that are going to, be consistent with the church's teaching there, and then these other things are secondary. um, but they don't present it that way in this catechism, right? It's just kind of all there as under honor thy mother and thy father. So it's an interesting thing. I think as the church and then the catechism begins to move from what we were saying God probably intended when he gave this to Moses, and now when you start moving more and more to other relationships, it gets a little bit more tenuous, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So let's just kind of push a little bit more. The fourth commandment illuminates other relationships in society. So now, basically, anyone, any your relationship is going to come under this this commandment. So before we get into the duties, let's kind of go back then, and this is really what Gwen was raising and all that kind of stuff. What is a family?
According to the church?
It says in 2202, a man and a woman united in marriage together with their children form a family.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the church teaches. And that's why some people left the church.
Right, because if you take it literally, that would say a man and a woman united in marriage without children is not a family.
Yeah.
Yes, it is saying that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, even before we go to same-sex marriages, just that one is saying that if a man and woman are married and the church accepts a man and woman to be married, but if they don't have children, they're not a family.
The one that a woman knows.
But everybody can't have children.
Correct.
The one that women were going crazy when somebody read that to them. They were going crazy because they couldn't, for some reason, your body can't allow you to have a child, and all of a sudden you telling me I don't have a family. How ridiculous is that?
Father Rich, I have a question too. Go ahead, whoever was talking.
No, I was going to say it takes me to Abraham and Sarah and Hagar.
Me too.
You know, that's the first thing it makes me think of. Yep. Sarah could not bear children, so she gives her slave to her husband because they have to have an heir.
I would have did that,
and whether she produces it or someone else produces it, even though she was probably he probably married Hagar. You know, they don't talk about that part.
She was married and she accepted criticism not only from her family, but outside of her family. That something was wrong with her this whole time they were married. The whole time she was married, because she couldn't produce a child, something was wrong with her. Couldn't have been wrong with
because when we read the Old Testament and we see these barren women, I mean, they are really, I mean, they're chastised horribly.
Yeah.
So, Father Rich, my question was, so this catechism we're using now is a revised or updated version?
Yes.
It's fundamentally the catechism that was released in, what was it? It was in the early 90s, 92 or something like that.
This one? The one we're using now?
I mean, it might have some little updates, but the one that we're looking at right now is well before Pope Francis.
Okay. And so revisions included, what I'm getting at is, as society changes, are these books, I don't know how I want to say that.
Good question. I know what you're asking, because that's a good question.
Because I'm like, I look at this versus, like, we look at the Constitution, right? The Constitution written in 18 whatever, but life as we have it now kind of screams out for some changes, you know? And so I'm like, as we as people change or evolve, does this book update to, one, remind us that stick with the godly principles you were taught as it relates to where we're at now in society? I'll stop right there.
I understand what you're saying, Michael. I mean, like, why can't it be that the family is constituting a single household and everyone in the household is serving the Lord? Why can't
and even Pope Francis is saying, and this is a change, he's blessing same-sex union, saying that can be done. He's not condoning it. but blessing them. And whereas before, the whole thought would not have even been acknowledged.
Well,
Right.
yeah, but just to be, because there it is important to be accurate. He does not say you can bless same-sex unions. He says you
Okay.
can bless people who are in same-sex unions.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's it's a little technical, but it is a difference. You're
Yeah.
not
Yes.
blessing the union, you're blessing the people. And that's one of the reasons he says you can do it, because you can bless anybody. You can bless the worst sinner in the world.
Mhm.
You could bless Adolf Hitler if he were alive. You could bless him, even though he's doing horrible things. So that was sort of kind of his sleight of hand there. He could say, "Oh, I'm not saying that same-sex unions are blessed. I'm just saying you can bless people." And that's
Okay.
part of the controversy, because then sometimes the same-sex attractive people will say then he hasn't gone far enough, right?
Mhm.
He's playing with us. So he's saying, "Oh, well, I can bless a sinner." Well, I'm not a sinner, they want to say. Well, anyway, it's 12:15, so I'm gonna need to move on. But these are all the issues. So to answer uh, Michael's question, really, when you look at the Catechism, what you're reading is what we call the Church's tradition. Okay, and the Church's tradition is formed by what Scripture says and what the experience of the Church over time is. So, absolutely, the Church has revised and updated its teachings in this 2,000 years. So what the Church teaches today is very different from what the Church would have taught, not very different, but somewhat different, at least, from what the Church would have taught 100 years ago and 200 years ago. Remember, there was a time when the Church taught that slavery was perfectly moral.
Yes.
And over time, as it reflects on, and as you know, the Scriptures have slavery in them, and so what the Church does is over time say, yeah, but we can't ignore what God is revealing to us through our own experience. And now I think the Church stepped away from slavery in the 18th century, but certainly by the 19th century it had. At some point the Church says that it's immoral, even though there's reference to slavery in the Bible, and St. Paul says slaves obey your masters. And a lot of the times, most of we've kind of cleaned it up, but whenever in the Gospels Jesus talks about a servant, often the Greek word that's being used is slave. And we're so uncomfortable with the idea that Jesus himself taught us parables through references to slavery, that we pretty it up by calling these people servants, because that at least makes us feel a little bit better. Well, the reality is the Church does update all of this stuff. Now, it doesn't update it every 5 years or something like that, and it'll probably be another 50 years to 100 years before it issues another catechism. But the Church's teaching is always dynamic. The tension is, how do you hold on to your tradition, but also be relevant and address the needs of the world as it is today? And that's where I think the Church struggles, because the Church really, if you start saying that a family, or is anybody living in the same household supporting each other and worshiping God, once you do that, you change a lot of what we've understood. And understandably, the Church gets very nervous about all that. So anyway, I thought, that would be good. If you want to continue, Dee, you're the host, so you can now, let me make you the host altogether. So you can, when you're done, you can stop the recording and end the meeting. And it's all it's all you guys. So I am going to leave and wish you well, and we'll
Thank
be
you,
in touch.
Father.
All right. God
Months.
bless.
Hope all